Hi, this is CSProfessorPam. Welcome back to Jumpstart Code. We are continuing to learn some JavaScript fundamentals. And we've been working on a really simple little example that has a button because JavaScript allows us to have action. And when we click on this button, we get an output of hello world. But this is kind of a boring little application because all it knows how to say is hello world. Suppose I want to make it a little more fun and allow you to input your name and it says hello to the person's name. So the first thing we need to do is think about our user interface. So right now we have a button that we can click. We have a place for output. But we need to add an element that we can allow the user to provide input. So we need an input element. And there is an input element in HTML that we can use to do this. So let's go to our HTML. Let's put the input above the button. So we're going to put an input element. Type equals text. It's text input. And remember, it's useful to be able to select this. So I'm going to give it an ID of your name. And we're going to give it a placeholder that says enter your name. And an input element is doesn't have a closing tag. It's just an empty element. All right, let's just make sure that our input element is correct here. So I'm going to save. And you see here, we now have our input element and we have our button. And right now, it still says hello world here. Now, if I want this button on the next line, just for right now, the easiest way to make that happen is we will put a break here. Okay, so let's save that. And we can see now we've got the text box and we've got our button, and we probably should use some margin and some padding to make this a little nicer, but that's not the focus of these particular lessons right now. We're focusing on functionality. All right, so right now it still just says hello world. But what I want to do is I want to be able to enter a name here. And when I click it, I want it to say hello Pam. Well, in order to do that, if I go over here to my JavaScript, the button is connected, that's fine. But I'm going to write myself some comments. Comments are how you kind of think through the logic of what you need to do. So I need to get the name from the text box. Okay. And we are going to use a variable to hold this name. A variable is just the way that I can create a box, a named box, to store some data. So this is our new concept for this video. I'm going to create this variable using let. Let is the keyword. Let your name, that's going to be the name of my variable, equal. So now I need to retrieve the name from the text box. So remember, how do we retrieve something from an element? How do we select the element? Document. You'll notice this get element by ID is a really useful command that we use a lot. Your name. Dot. What I need is the value, right? So what goes after this dot varies depending on what you want to do, right? When I was connecting an event listener, it was dot on click. When I was putting something into this H2, it's dot text content. But when I'm getting something or putting something into this input, it is dot value. You might wonder, how are you supposed to know all this, recognize all this? It's all in your MDN documents, and it's all from practice. All right, now let's make sure we got something. So I'm going to use my console log to see what did I actually get and store in that variable. And when I do this, I like to put some words in front of it. So I'm going to say your name is, and then I'm using a plus. Now, this plus sign here is not addition because these two things are strings. This plus sign, I call it glue. I'm gluing those two things together. I'm gluing together this text string, and I'm asking it to tell me, what did you put in this box, this variable that I created? Okay, so let's take a look and see what happens. So we'll refresh. I'll put my name in here. I'll click. And do you see over here in the console? It says your name is, so whatever I put in these quotes got displayed here without the quotes. And then we said, hold on, add something else to this line. And it put in there whatever was the contents that I put there, right? If I put Batman here, then it says your name is Batman. So we are retrieving the user input from this text box, and we are storing that into this variable so that I can then go back and refer to it. Okay, so now what do I actually want to do with that? I want to, instead of saying hello world, I want to say hello and that name. So we're going to use this plus, this glue operator, to change what we display here. So I'm going to say hello. Then I'm going to use some glue, and I'm going to put in whatever's in your name. And then if I want to put the exclamation point at the end, I can just turn this into an exclamation point. So this content, hello plus or glue together whatever's in your name, glue together the exclamation point, that is what is going to get placed into the text content of this element. Okay, now let's go look and see. All right, so that's almost what I want. Now I did that on purpose because I want you guys to understand you are in complete control. You have to decide when and where to put spaces in a string. So I did not say to put any spaces, and the compiler, the JavaScript is not going to make any assumptions for me. So if I want a space after hello here, you can put as many spaces as you want to here. It's not going to make any difference. You have to put the space here as part of the string, okay? So that you will actually see that displayed. So let's save, go back over here, put in a name, right? So we see that. If I put in something with space, if I put jumpstart code here and I say hello, we get hello jumpstart code, right? If I say Captain Kirk, I get hello Captain Kirk. So whatever text I put here, that text is being retrieved from the input box and placed in a variable, and then I'm using that over here, right? Now you might wonder, well, do I have to use this variable, or can I do this sort of all in one long statement? And you could. Okay, I could do this without a variable. I could do something like this. I'm going to copy this line, but the reason I wouldn't recommend it is because there's a lot of little details you have to get exactly right. So I'm going to comment this out. So I could replace your name with this whole thing, right? Because when I created the variable, I basically said anytime you see your name, it should be whatever you get from here. So if I copy this and put that in here, right? But it becomes a really long statement, and your statements can go across lines here if you use semicolons at the end of your statements. So I'm saying to first put the hello, then go get the data from the text box, then put the exclamation point on the end. But it is so much better and makes for so much more readable code if you break things into pieces. And it'll also allowed me to make sure that I had the value before I moved on, right? Because I used the console log to do this. Because, for example, all right, remember over here there was text content, and you might think, well, okay, text content is what I'm supposed to use here. Okay, let's see what happens. All right, so what happened? I get the hello, but I don't get anything else. I don't get an error message, but it turns out there is no such thing as text content that I can get from an input element. And so this just gave me back nothing, basically, and we just glued on nothing, and that's why this didn't work. So this is why it is really useful to take data, store it into a variable, so that you can then use console log to make sure that what you think you have is actually there, right? A lot of programming problems happen because you are assuming something. You are assuming that you know the data that's in your variable, and it turns out you don't. So you have to make sure and double check that you've got your data and then move on from there. So we've learned a lot of JavaScript concepts in these first 3 lessons. We've actually learned how to attach action or to a button by giving it a name of a function and creating a function. And we've learned a little bit about assignment statements and about creating variables and how to display things on the console, and also how to use getElementById to basically select different elements on our web page. We selected our button and attached a click event to it. We selected our input element and used .value to retrieve whatever the user typed in, and we used our H2 element and applied text to our H2 element. So it's a really good start to some really fundamental concepts. And the best thing that you can do now is actually try to do this entire project over from scratch without necessarily looking at the code, right? The way you get good at doing programming and doing JavaScript is by repetition and by working on small projects like this. So hopefully you will do that, and we will continue to add some other projects and add concepts on as we build other projects.